Hello, and welcome back to the Day Luna Human Design Podcast with your hosts, Dana and Shayna. We are recording an episode today all about that real about the emotional center, the shit that people don't talk about, because we have been observing so deeply that this is the most important realm to be focusing on. And the energetics that you can understand about your emotions through human design, I truly believe is life-changing. It's revolutionary. If people knew this dynamic within themselves and the dynamic of others in their emotional centers, the world would change. And that is the way that the world is changing as we grow into the new paradigm. So we're really excited to dive into that and share things that we've never actually talked about before with those emotional centers in this episode. And today we are recording on the very first day of spring here in the Northern Hemisphere, right after the spring equinox yesterday. And I am feeling so grateful. There are literally baby bunnies in my yard and birds chirping and flowers blossoming and clouds gently drifting by. And I'm just really feeling the spring is so beautiful here in the desert and so welcomed change to our other seasons. It's the most lush season we have. So I've been really enjoying the blossoming and the blooming of spring.
Me too. Every time I go outside in general, I feel like I fall in love with life a little bit more this time of year especially, but it's so crazy how we forget, right? And it's such a good analogy of life in general and our cycles and how we think that what we experience in one moment is what we're going to experience forever. Like we just think like, this is who I am now. This is how my life is. Like I'm afraid. I'm always going to be afraid, or I hate my job. The world, everyone hates their job. Like we just think that wherever we are, that this is now everything forever.
So it's
And
like, it's
we
winter. It's
forget.
going to be winter forever.
It's like,
And
oh,
then
I'm always cold. Like I'm just cold. And I'm a cold person. I run cold, and then you get to the summer and you're like, I'm always hot. Like it's so crazy how inside of our minds, like we wouldn't say these things necessarily out loud, but internally we can feel this feeling of like stuckness, even though every single freaking year it literally changes through the seasons, depending on where you live, right? But it's such a good analogy. But this time of year, I literally forget every single time until it's here. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I love my life. I love my plants. I love the trees. I love this leaf. I love, like, literally love everything. And
yeah.
right now in my yard, everything is blooming. Like we have this jasmine plant that we planted years ago, but it hadn't really like matured enough. And it's like climbing up one of our walls. And
Nice.
this year it's so blossomed, like so full that the whole entire yard is just perfumed with jasmine right now. Like the second you step outside, and then our orange tree is blossoming as well. So you walk near that and you get all of this
And
orange
those
blossom smells.
those are amazing. The blossoms
I
on your
know.
orange tree smell so beautiful.
So good. I'm like, I need to rub this all over my body. Like it smells amazing. And then our roses are blooming. And then so you go walk past those and you get that with, like, there's just so many scents, and I'm smell cognition. So I'm just like so enveloped into, but then the second
Mm.
I come inside, it's like I forgot that that exists until I go outside again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, this is what's available to me. And it's so funny how, yeah, I mean, maybe you could call that presence, but at the same time, um, like knowing that the present moment is not forever. Like
Yeah.
it's just this present moment. Can you take it in?
I was just listening to this girl talking about Ayurveda and talking about seasonal living. Such a huge part of Ayurveda and really honoring our health and our wellness is seasonal living, like really having different routines that are necessary for our health in the different seasons, needing to take care of ourselves in different ways. And the switch of the seasons, they said, is like the most vulnerable time for us because we get into kind of a consistent groove and that feels really comfortable. And exactly what you're saying, like you think it's going to be your life forever and you feel sort of like safe in that. And then when the season changes, we change and our lives change. And that's actually a time that can be really vulnerable for people because it's like, okay, a new set of ways I'm taking care of myself, a new set of clothing that I'm going to dress my body in. Like everything is new when you move into a new season. And that can actually be a time that feels a little bit vulnerable, disruptive for people. But I was thinking about out of all of the changes from seasons, the change from winter into spring, that starting point to me feels the easiest and the most celebratory. And the other changes I think are maybe more challenging for me sometimes, but this change from winter to spring, I'm like, bring it on. It feels so good.
It's so funny. I feel doubled down right now with that message because I'm almost 6 months pregnant. And, the start of the pregnancy was like, it was so rough, right? And the first trimester is rough for a lot of people. And you can be sick, you're like re-navigating a whole new normal and like learning new ways that your body's needing to be supported. And it's everything that you just said. And then you kind of get into the second trimester where you're like, okay, I'm kind of learning my body. Of course, every single week there's something new, there's something different that's popping up that you're relearning about yourself. But there can be this tendency I notice where I feel like my body's changing and this is just who I am now. Like I'm just gonna be like this, like the same freaking thing comes up and Brian's always like, it's just because you're pregnant, just until, and then I'm like, it's so hard for me to even think about it going back to normal or maybe not because it's such an unknown and you just don't know until you're there. But it's
Yeah.
been such a learning journey being pregnant in general and there's just so many things that I'm learning about my body and forcing me to be more present in my body, which is something that I've talked about on this podcast. Is it's been hard for me to get out of my mind and into my body and or get even out of my like sense my spirit and realize like I have a body and that I need to feed and exercise and feel and take care of. And this journey has definitely forced me to be my body 100% of the time, which has been really amazing to observe. But things that you do not realize are Olympic sports until you're pregnant. It's great. Like taking a shower, hands down, like no questions asked for number one. Like taking a shower is an Olympic sport at this point. And I just had no idea before. Like I thought that it was like kind of tiring before because I'm a projector and I have limited energy, whatever. But now it's literally like if I take a shower, I need at least 2 hours afterwards to catch my breath and to like really,
Whoa.
to really calm down from this literal Olympic sport that I just did. And same thing with getting dressed is now an Olympic sport, but specifically getting dressed and then realizing that the clothes that you're putting on no longer fit because as you're then you have to try to maneuver them off of your body. And it's a whole thing that is exhausting. And then you have to immediately find something new to put on. But by the end of it, you're done. Like, it's like, why did I even get dressed? I need to get back into bed.
And it's an emotional Olympic sport, like
oh my gosh.
the whole journey, which that takes a lot of energy, which we're going to get into this episode about the emotional center being a motor center and processing and digesting your emotions takes energy. So it's like that is compared with the physicality of needing to bend down and put on socks or whatever when you have a baby living inside of your body.
Yes. And speaking of emotions, it's been a lot harder now being pregnant. My body's energy is being so focused on this baby for me to be able to clear out my energy and clear out emotions because I didn't realize to the extent of how much energy that required for me as a non-emotional being to clear out energy of other people that now I have very limited resources when it comes to my energy just in, building this life in my body. So it's just so fascinating to see the different energetic layers that are affected by being pregnant. And it's funny on one hand, like, oh, okay. And then I'm sure everyone can relate who's been pregnant or who is pregnant right now listening. But then on the other hand, it's like, wait, how come nobody told me this? Like, how come nobody told me, when I'm around them and they're pregnant, like, it's really hard for me to clear out the emotions of the person that I was just with, or like, I just feel like I got put off by this experience and it's really hard for me to shake. Like nobody mentioned that to me. And
Mhm.
in sharing my experience, so many people are like, "Oh yeah, I felt that too." It's like, "Oh
Mhm.
my gosh, okay." Like this is an experience that we're all having, as females that are choosing to like build life in their bodies, and it's such a like common thing, yet we don't talk about it or share it because, well, we haven't historically had the resources to be able to share so freely, through social media and the internet and all the things that we have now. But it's just so crazy to me. I'm like, okay, I need to talk about this more, but also it's going to be a whole new thing that I'm talking about next week. Like it's never ending until
And
I don't even know.
And you've been saying like, yeah, there's like a level of vulnerability, but also that you feel more now when you're pregnant than ever before, but also a level of strength. And that really makes sense if we're thinking about this concept of like, if you're constantly changing, that makes you more vulnerable, like this Ayurvedic concept. In pregnancy, you are constantly changing. And so, of course, that makes you more vulnerable, but also through being adaptable and present and allowing that change, and allowing that vulnerability, you build a really strong internal strength, because vulnerability and strength are like two sides of one coin when you're really operating out of the highest expression with them. So it's really cool to see that, like, we've been talking about that, but to hear this like Ayurvedic sort of angle, I'm like realizing it in a deeper way.
Yeah. And I think a big lesson that in the same angle is like really being able to surrender to not contain yourself, like to take up space. And what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by that is, physically when you're pregnant, your body is growing and taking up space, and it stretches your internal capacity to like be okay with that. And on one side, it feels there's parts that feel really good. Like I no longer need to try to suck in my stomach after I eat a big meal and feel like, oh gosh, I'm really bloated. Like my jeans are tight, or like this outfit's showing that. Like, let me try to, it's kind of like this subconscious thing that we all have programmed in us, especially as women, to like suck in our stomach when we're on a date or when we're around, other people or whatever. And now being pregnant, it's like, oh no, I just look a little bit more pregnant. And it's cute. And it's like, oh, your bump is big. And it's like, yeah, it is. And I just had a massive meal. Um, so it's on one hand, there's that side that's really beneficial and like, oh, this is nice. I didn't realize how much I even thought about sucking my stomach in until now that I can't. And then on the other side of that is this realization of, things changing that are out of your control. And can you have acceptance for that and find love in that and find beauty in that and be okay with or daring to take up space in a way that you can't control? That question alone, control, like a lot of us are okay with taking up space if we can control what we're going to say, who we're going to be around, how we're going to be perceived, the like all of the facets of it. And we don't even realize that it's, in being messy, there's a lot of angles that we find to have control even within our mess and how it's perceived by other people. But this journey has really forced me to notice that energetic tightness in my body and lean into like like choosing consciously to release that control, that frequency of tightness that you feel when you think of control and when you think of being a mess or when you think of being ugly or when you think of being, too much or too much space is being taken, to just like set that tightness down and to just
Mm-hmm.
let it be there, even though maybe it's gross or maybe it's weird or maybe it's annoying or whatever that is. And so there's a lot of lessons that I'm learning this that I think are really helpful for anyone, regardless if you're pregnant or not, like noticing the frequency of control in your body and surrender in your body. And if you're surrendering, but with the lens even still of that frequency of control in that surrender, or if it's like really easing into surrender and what that really feels like in your body. There's just so many things there. So that's just something to think about and start noticing in your day, in your body, because all of these things that we're putting language to, and even in this episode, as we talk about emotions, it's a frequency, right? Like it's something that you feel in your body and even in your mind, depending on what the thing is, you can feel this frequency that you're holding on to or that you're navigating or that you're even creating with your thoughts. And you can then choose to transmute them or lean into them and feel them more or alchemize them or be empowered by them or release them. So it's starting to notice when we share these words, what frequencies come up in your body and can you work with them or have they just been the frequencies that are kind of running your life and you didn't even realize because you didn't have the words or awareness to show you and really highlight that they exist. So
Mhm.
let's get into emotions,
Yeah,
right?
it's interesting. Like a lot of the themes that you're talking about, even thinking about emotions, emotions are so powerful. They run our world in such a deep way that we don't even recognize. And the thing about emotions is that they're always changing, they're always coming, they're always going. So, in this whole conversation about taking up space and allowing things to be messy and not needing to control something, but surrendering to it and being okay with being felt in that space and not like blocking it out or whatever. That is really the type of inner strength that we're meant to meet our emotions with. And also the thing about emotions is that they're always that constant, ever-changing thing that has such a strong presence, but then it changes and is onto something else. And that is whether it's your emotional wave or whether it's an emotion that you're experiencing because of your life, like in reaction to your life. The thing about emotions is that they're not a consistent, everlasting, linear truth, the way a lot of masculine mental ideas have been formulated in our world. So I feel like this whole realm of emotions is really the realm of finding true inner power through surrender, through vulnerability, through all of the things that we've been talking about, right? It lends itself really well into this emotional realm. And one of the reasons why we think talking about emotions is so important is because it is a polarizing topic. When we talk about being a non-emotional or an emotional being, what we're talking about is either having a defined solar plexus or an undefined solar plexus. So if you're new to human design, we want to invite you to look up your human design chart. You can do so on our website for free at daylunalife.com. Once you generate your chart and you're looking at your body graph, you're going to look at the rightmost triangle and on that right hand side. And if that is colored in at all, then that means that you are an emotional being and you have an emotional wave. And if that center is white, then it means that you're undefined. And so if you're undefined, it means you pick up other people's emotions and experience them in your body at an amplified version. So if you're taking in other people's emotions, you really do feel them in your own body. You receive their energy, take it into your body like an emotional sponge and experience that energy in your own body. So that's like, I really have to highlight that because there's a huge difference between being sympathetic and sensitive and aware of other people's emotions versus taking in their emotion and experiencing it in your own body at an amplified version. So you're experiencing their emotion more intensely than they are. That is profound to really wrap your head around. And 50% approximately of the population has this undefined emotional center where they are emotionally empathetic. Now, the other half does not take in other people's emotions into their own body because they are defined. So if you have the center colored in and you're defined, it means that you are creating your own emotional wave that is in addition to the normal range of human emotions you feel in reaction to your life. Besides that, you also have random highs and random lows on a constant wave, and you are projecting that energy out, right? You are like a transmitter, whereas someone that's undefined is like a receiver. So, approximately half of us are transmitting emotions all the time, and they're not even necessarily an emotion that comes from our life. It's just a random emotion. And half of us are taking in, are receiving and amplifying. That is a huge interplay that is happening constantly. And even when you're at the grocery store and you're not interacting with someone, your emotional center and their emotional center are interplaying with one another, and you affect one another. You feel one another. So, these emotions are so powerful and so broad in our life and are so ever changing and are very mysterious because we don't understand as a collective that interplay of, am I someone who's a receiver, who's empathetic, who's picking up things outside of me and experiencing it really powerfully in my own body? Or am I a transmitter that's transmitting my emotions and conditioning other people, but not all of my emotions are actually a real reaction to my life? I have a random emotional wave as well.
Yes. And this awareness of your emotional center honestly is one of the best things that you can do to help every single relationship in your life. Whether that's your coworkers, whether that is the people that you run into at the grocery store, you having awareness of how your emotional center operates, that alone, because there's this interplay happening all the time, you are impacting and changing people's lives without even trying to or having that be your intention because you've done the energetic housekeeping, if you will, to take care of your own shit and kind of be in the highest vibration with those emotions. So this emotional hygiene and ways that you can lean into understanding your emotions and uh taking responsibility for the things that you're feeling. We have a mini course in Besties where we really talk through a lot of practices that you can do. So if this is something that you're interested in, we recommend checking that out. There's so many different resources in there, but that mini course specifically is so helpful because this is one of the biggest things you can do to change the world, but also to support your family and support your loved ones, and in doing like automatically supporting yourself. So if you have a defined emotional center, let's get into what the solar plexus is, whether it's defined or undefined, I guess I should say. And this solar plexus is an awareness center and it's a motor. So, what that tells us is that you can have this energy, if you have this defined, to process emotions, to have passion and desire, to feel feelings and moods and be sensitive, but in a way that is um, emotionally intelligent and deep. And this energy here, this being a motor, it's consistent, right? Even though you have highs and lows and it's a wave that you could say is inconsistent, it's consistent that you always have an emotional wave. You're always having this emotional energy propelling you in your life and guiding you to divine timing. Now, if you have this undefined, it's inconsistent, right? You can be around someone who has this and you're amplifying it. You also can have something happen to you and you have reactionary emotions. And now you're creating this emotion that maybe somebody else around you who's undefined can pick up and amplify. But this emotional depth, this desire and passion and emotional intelligence that comes from the center, this is something that is growing and that we are mutating into the new paradigm. It is something that this emotional intelligence is a big part of how we are growing as a species to really understand our emotions and understand our spirituality through our emotions. So this center is huge. It's so important. And it all starts with knowing, okay, I am meant to be feeling this or I am not consistently. And that consistently is the key, I would say.
Yeah, because with this center defined, so I have my solar plexus defined and Shayna has hers undefined. And we love that we have that dynamic because we get to really explore from a firsthand experience and observe each other on how it interplays. And if you have a defined solar plexus, the solar plexus is the center that is connected to a desire to experience pleasure and romance, but also pain and heartbreak. And it's a driving force, right? Because it's that motor. So this is the place where poetry is born, where romance is born. But I really wanted to highlight that it's different than sexuality. Sexuality and fertility and that sexual power to create really comes from the sacral. So it can be kind of confusing, right? I feel like we blend these worlds without this awareness in our lives about our human design. We blend these worlds. But when you have your defined solar plexus, it's this constant drive to feel, and feeling in that way deepens you and creates that emotional intelligence. So it's important to know that if you have this defined, then you are constantly driven to feel, and that longing, that passion, that desire to feel life more deeply is something that you're meant to experience. And now that's beautiful, but you have to develop a true acceptance of all spectrum of emotion, the whole spectrum. So you can't just only want to feel ecstasy and bliss and pleasure and avoid at all costs pain. And that tends to be a big thing that we feel in life is we're addicted to the highs and we're trying to avoid the lows. And that's a not self for everyone. So even if you have this defined, you can have a not self here of being really controlling around your emotions, like trying, not allowing the full spectrum to be there, not allowing that messy vulnerability, but even still like trying to contrive or hold on to or attach to certain things. And if you have this center undefined, if you're undefined solar plexus, you're not meant to have that consistent drive and passion, that drive to experience romance or longing or that lust for life. And it's really important to just know that and have that awareness and embrace that. And there is so much conditioning in our society around romance, also around sexuality and fertility and things like that, which is more the realm of the sacral. But I feel like so much of our conditioning and programming are these stories where we have this passion and this longing and like wanting someone, but not wanting someone. And that whole realm, it can be used to really sort of like manipulate us or keep us in a not self because it is such a powerful energy and driving force.
Yeah. And it's interesting, as a non emotional, observing that when I watch a movie that is, romantic and passionate and drama filled, I can feel like this, like, oh my gosh, this is what life is. Like, I'm amplifying that and I feel like this is amazing. What's wrong with my life that I don't feel this all the time? Like, what's wrong with my relationship that I don't feel this passionate pull that I saw in this movie? And of course, your mind can go to, well, it's a movie, it's not real, it's whatever. And you can logically bring yourself back off the cliff edge, if you will. But you can see that in, your friends or your family who are so have this consistent energy to have that fire, that passion, that desire and romance in their every single day life, and question like, what's wrong with me? Because I felt that at times, but I don't feel that every single day or every single week or every single month even. And it's knowing that it is meant to be inconsistent if you have this undefined. So sometimes you're going to feel that, and then sometimes you're not. And getting addicted to the high or the passion or desire, romance, or whatever, the depth, if you will, is a really slippery slope because you're the only one who's going to know if you're doing that. You're the only one who's going to know, is this real for me right now? And I'm amplifying this and taking it and running with it. It feels really good. Or is this something that I felt maybe yesterday or last week that I am trying to force and contrive and make a big part of my life? And now I'm judging if everything that I've ever done is wrong, or what's wrong with me for not having this. Now, this question of what's wrong with me can apply to non-emotionals and emotionals. So you can be an emotionally defined person and experience a high and then feel like that's me. That's who I am. I have to chase that high. I have to be that high. I have to hold on to that high. You also can be an emotionally defined person and have a low and feel depressed and feel despair. And identify with that and hold on to it and say, I have depression. I need to go to a doctor. Nobody understands me. I feel despair. This is who I am now, and really identify it with the clothes that you wear, with the music that you listen to, with the conversations that you have or you don't have, and identify, this is me. And of course, all of this identifying comes from a lack of not knowing who you truly are, because all of us as humans are trying to figure out on some subconscious level, whether we realize it or not, who we are and what our consciousness is, and how we're different from other people. And so when you don't have those answers, the first intense thing that you feel, you try to hold on to. And we see it all the time, with people with sports, for example, like a lot of men who don't know who they are and are scared to go on that journey of figuring out who they are in general can say, oh, I am a Raiders fan. That's who I am. And be obsessed and have all the flags and have all the, whatever decor and watch every single game and never miss it. And they're like holding on to it. And that is who they are. And people do that with religions. People do that with, their politics and the people that they're voting for, and with movements and things like that, things that are outside of themselves. And of course, there can be a high expression of, maybe you're really into sports because of the community and because you love sharing in that with your family and because you love the energy that you feel when you're there. But there's only you are going to know, am I doing that because I'm chasing this high that I once felt that now I'm holding on to and identifying with, and it's giving me a sense of knowing who I am and why I'm here in this world? Or am I doing it from a place of my authority and I know who I am, and this is not, I don't identify with this thing, but I enjoy this thing and it brings a lot of love and connection into my life, right? So when it comes to emotions, that's just an example. When it comes to emotions, we can do this on these layers that aren't so obvious, that aren't so, broadcasted with a flag in your yard, but on a level where you are now keeping yourself to have to always be the positive, happy person, or else something's wrong with you, or to have to be the person that other people are worried about and are, concerned about, because that's what you're holding on to. And this goes for emotionally defined or undefined, because you can be an emotionally undefined person and amplify somebody else's high and then be chasing that high all the time, or amplify somebody else's low and hold yourself there and keep yourself there. And now not let that move through your body. So in general, when it comes to identifying with the things that you're feeling, it's knowing that we are not meant to be feeling the one thing that we felt forever. It's a wave that's meant to be surfed if you are emotionally defined. And it's an emotion that you are meant to feel and then process and let go of and come back to your emotionally neutral state if you are undefined. So I love that we talked about cycles and stuff in the beginning, because it really applies, and we had no idea that we were going to be talking about that. That always happens.
The same. It's the same story. Like, I'm feeling this one thing, so this is what I am forever. Like, we have that tendency to do that, to hold on to that one thing, to try to keep it forever. And we forget that there's other things that we feel. And so emotions are that same way. I mean, as you were talking, it reminds me of like all of the notes in a piece of music. Like, we need the high notes and we need the low notes. Like, we want it all, right, to make a beautiful piece of music. But you hear the one high note and it's like, I'm just clinging on to that. And I'm going to try to force that to be my personality all the time. But like, a one single high note in a song would be the worst song ever, right? We need all of the notes. So it's sort of like embracing that full spectrum. You can see how it adds beauty, how it adds depth, and that the song keeps playing. It doesn't just pause on this one thing. And so to allow that to happen is a form of wisdom. It's a form of vulnerability, like we were saying in the beginning, but also a form of strength. And it's so interesting with emotions. It's the background that's trying to program us in everything we do. Like what you were saying with sports, like you get obsessed with this one team because you're trying to chase this high note that you felt this one time. You're trying to make that feeling or that emotion, your personality. Like they use emotions in when we're watching a commercial about like Coca-Cola and these people are at the party with their friends and all of their friends are so nice and cool. Like they're selling you a product through trying to sell you this emotion that feels good to you, that you want to identify with. You know, in so many ways, even like our political worldview can be very, very swayed in this emotional realm if we don't have awareness of our emotional center, right? It's emotionally charging you to have this message about this political view or this worldview. And that emotion becomes so strong, you almost get addicted to it without really having the awareness of letting it move through you or riding that emotion. And then we can try to grasp onto worldviews or answers or opinions based on a not self of our emotional center. Like it really is in the background of so many different areas of our life. So it's not just the interplay of you and your relationships or you and other people around you. It's also this interplay of your entire worldview or becoming your own authority, becoming a external authority for other people in your highest expression.
Yeah, it's the relationship you have with yourself and being able to observe yourself. So many people in the collective are not really observing themselves. They're trying to, a lot of times people are trying to, but they don't have the languaging or the awareness or the consciousness or support or resources or education to really start to understand who they are and become their own authority. And when you become your own authority, first of all, you can release the not self of this emotional center and of all of the different centers because it's no longer about what you identified with when you felt this one thing or holding on to something that you felt, a year ago. But it's all about what is my body through your authority, whatever that is, telling you in this moment. That is your frequency truth. That is your geometric truth of aligning you to where you are meant to be in your life. And so it is very non-judgmental. It's very objective because you then can see that other people have their own authority that they can be tapping into, and your authority doesn't have to be the authority over other people, because then you're not really operating from your authority. You're once again holding on to a thing that you felt with your authority maybe in that one moment, but now you're trying to project that for all time over everyone in your family or over everyone, in the world with this one view or this one thing that you felt that was right for you specifically. So it's really interesting how we can have moments where we are ourselves, and then we can not allow ourselves to change from that. And then now a month has gone by and we're not ourselves, actually. We're who we were a month ago, and keep ourselves from changing. And the passion and the emotion and the things that we feel, right? They're ultimately, if we keep ourselves there, we keep ourselves stuck. We keep ourselves from growth, even though that emotion might be, I'm so passionate about this political issue or this worldview and I want to change it. But because you're not letting yourself move through that and feel something else, you're actually keeping progress from coming to that effort that you're so passionate about. Because maybe now, if you were to process it, you would have a different understanding, or you would have a different insight of what you're wanting to do next or how you're wanting to get involved next, instead of just staying from that one stance that you felt, a month ago. So knowing that, processing your emotions and having awareness and allowing them to change and shift, and keeping that openness of and that surrender, that acceptance that they are going to change and shift. And yes, you feel this now, but you're not going to feel this maybe tomorrow. Allowing yourself to have that spaciousness, ultimately, our emotions are guiding us towards growth, towards divine timing, towards being in the right place at the right time, and feeling the right people at the right time, and having, if you have emotional authority, having the clarity at the right time when you're meant to share that. So trusting that the surrender of letting this change and flow and move through you is actually the way towards achieving your goals or having growth or having expansion and evolution in our society, not feeling that one thing that your mind latched onto and said, this is how we have growth. And now we have to force this upon everyone. And we have to chase this forever. That's actually the thing that is keeping you stuck, even though maybe your intention is growth and evolution and expansion. So surrender is the way. And that's why this emotional center it's mutating. It's evolving us into this new paradigm through understanding it and through experiencing it. And it's such an individual process, right? It's not one size fits all. So when we talk about the emotional center and how collectively we are dissecting and giving language to a lot of emotions that we didn't have languaging for 5-10 years ago, there's so much coming out, so much information coming out. And it's amazing because it is fast tracking this center to really mutate and really understand our emotions with a lot of depth. However, you can get trapped, and you're the only one who's going to know, in identifying with, oh, I now have all these mental health resources. I'm depressed, or I'm bipolar, or I have personality disorder. I have all these different, things. And we're going to do a whole podcast and even, deep dive human design training on mental health and the emotions that we can feel, and human design's lens, and how we can transmute those things and work with those things and lean into them. That's a whole other different topic. But my point is that we're not perfect yet. Like we're not there at the end of evolving our consciousness. Like we are evolving our consciousness. We are contributing to the collective consciousness, and we are in the process of mutation. So that looks like getting new information, and then of course wanting to latch onto it and hold on to it because that's what we've been taught to do, and build from that one starting off point, and then realizing that that's what we're doing, and then letting it go and move through it and surrender and get the lessons and wisdom there to then have the next thing come in, and knowing that that's individual for every single person. And so your job is to do it for yourself. That's the best gift that you can give the collective, is to let yourself be your own authority truly. And that looks like surrendering to what it is that you feel in this moment, regardless of what you felt or learned or discovered yesterday.
Yeah. And the reason that this is such a big shift, when we talk about us being 9-centered beings in human design, we have these 9 energy centers, but that's new for us in our evolution, right? We used to be 7-centered beings that operate from the mental awareness instead of the emotional awareness. So that mental awareness is the conditioning force that's trying to get us to latch on to one thing, identify with that one thing, keep it there, singular forever. It's this very masculine energy, linear energy, and unchanging. And that feels strong for us. That feels strategic. I put in quotes, like the way that we are conditioned to see things. And this emotional awareness, this spiritual awareness that comes from the solar plexus, this is new. This is our growth. This is our evolution. And it is so much this more feminine way of things being cyclical and ever flowing and ever changing and messy and vulnerable. But there is such a strength in that. So when we talk about this, like personal responsibility with your emotional center, it really is when you take personal responsibility and make sure you understand your dynamics and are using the energetic hygiene each day, you are changing the consciousness of this planet. You are supporting the change that's happening when you take this responsibility. And it's really interesting, even though we call undefined solar plexus people, we call it non-emotionals, it's not at all that you have less emotions or that you feel emotions less. So it's really like both, whether you're defined or undefined, they're both challenging. They're both a lot, but they do have different energetic dynamics. So getting into those subtleties is really where the magic happens. And that's sort of what we want to talk about next. We want to talk about the shit that nobody tells you about your solar plexus, whether it's defined or undefined, these deeper layers that if you're really going to start taking responsibility for your emotional center and being the change that is happening in the world and ushering in higher consciousness through doing that, you kind of need to know these layers that people might miss when you're first learning about your solar plexus.
Yeah. And I just want to say that if we have our emotions running wild with a lack of awareness, we can have unresolved emotional stressors that trigger our nervous system constantly. And physically, we can have water retention and weight gain and major organs systems being affected. So just kind of knowing like there's a physical side to all of this whole emotional, felt, energetic world. And so knowing some of these deeper layers can help you to really start healing those more physical aspects as well. So the shit no one tells you with undefined, non-emotional beings, as one myself, one is check how many defined hanging gates you have coming off of your emotional center. So what that is, if you're new to human design, you look at your emotional center, that bottom right most triangle. Um, if you have that white and then you have some gates there that are colored in, like let's say you have gate 22 that has like a circle around it and then it has a line going up that's stretching up to the throat, for example, or you have gate 6 that's trying to stretch to the sacral center. You just have a gate that is there, but it's not connecting to a center. That's called a hanging gate. And these are places where you can experience a wave randomly based off of a person that you're around that maybe connects to that from the other gate from the opposite center and now is creating a full channel and creating this emotional wave for you. Or a transit can happen where the transit is in the opposite gate that's then connecting to your hanging gate. And now it's creating this channel for you and you're experiencing this emotional wave. So, for example, this happened to me a few nights ago. The sun was in gate 36 and I have gate 35. And so, well, actually, that's coming off of my throat center, but this is an example, right? The sun is in gate 36 coming off of the solar plexus, and I have gate 35, which would connect to that coming off of my throat center. So my hanging gate is connecting to a transit gate, and it's creating this emotional wave for me that isn't consistent still because it's going to go away when the transit changes. And it's not something that I'm meant to make decisions based off of. I'm still meant to use my strategy and authority. And if this is all new information for you, we teach about this with images and PDFs and everything in our Human Design Besties membership. So if you're wanting to really learn a lot about human design, that's an amazing resource. And it's only like $33 a month. And there's well over $3,000 worth of content in that portal. So even if you just sign up for a month, you would literally like, you could learn it all and then you could cancel anytime. Like I'm like, we put some content heavy shit out there. But anyways, because we just can't help ourselves. But with that happening to me this last week, I went to try on clothes because we got invited to this gala dinner for Brian's work last minute. And I was like, yeah, let's go. It sounds fun. That sounds exciting. And I can think of 3 or 4 different flowy items in my closet that gotta work because yes, I'm pregnant, but like they're flowy and they were big on me before. And every single one of them did not fit. Like, and when you try on clothes that don't fit, they look so bad that I had this emotional wave that is this expectation wave that was false, but it was being created by this transit. And I had a crash on my fake emotional wave. And I literally cried for like an hour. And it took me, I couldn't shake it like all the whole next day. I just had tears in my eyes for no reason, just there. Like at any moment, something could happen and then all the tears would just come falling out of my eyes. Like it was on the brink. And for me as a non-emotional being, that is not something I experience regularly, if ever in my life, unless I'm around somebody who's having this emotion and I felt it, in that moment and I can really identify like, oh, this is what they're feeling. But to have it happen to myself randomly because of this transit, it's then knowing, oh, this isn't my truth. This isn't like I am somebody who struggles with my body image and, human design. I mean, pregnancy is now making me really face that. And I hate my body and I hate my clothes. Like it's not my truth. It's just I had a crash on my fake emotional wave. And so knowing that you can still experience emotional waves having an undefined center if you have these hanging gates that are then connecting with somebody else's who bridges that and creates a channel for you, or a transit that's happening. So this is important to know, because so many people who have an undefined emotional center will tell us like, well, I resonate with feeling an emotional wave sometimes. And I resonate with the slides that you posted on Instagram about emotional authority. Like, why is that? And this is why. So
Yes.
it's knowing that it's not consistent. Whereas for somebody with an emotional authority who has an emotional wave, it is consistent. And Dana has this expectation wave, and she's managing her expectations all the time and having a crash. And that bitch cries several times a day. And
Yes.
I genuinely, to cry, it's so much energy that like I don't cry that often. And then I sometimes I want to cry because it just feels good to process those emotions. So I'll watch a movie that makes me cry, and then I will sob and it'll feel so good. And then it's like gone, gone. Like it's
Yeah.
not me. It just was, I was like using, I don't know, something to get off emotionally.
And when
And
we
it
talk
worked.
about just this one experience that you're saying, you see how complex that is? And Shayna's an in quote non-emotional, right? But there is so much depth to that. It's important to understand what's really happening. Because like she was saying, if you didn't have this awareness, if you didn't say, oh, I'm a non-emotional, so this is weird, let me check my transit. Oh yeah, I have this fake emotional wave right now. Like if you didn't do that whole process and you didn't have that awareness, you could easily create some crazy story in your mind and then attach onto it and cling onto it and create a lot of misalignment, a lot of tension, a lot of not self in your life from that lack of awareness. And in my own personal life, my husband is a non-emotional and I'm an emotional. And so we wake up in the bed together, and whatever my emotional wave is, he's been physically near it. So in the morning, he's always going to be amplifying whatever I'm feeling. So when he wakes up in a bad mood for no reason, the first thing he does, he looks over at me and says, "Are you on a low on your wave?" And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm actually not. He's like, I think you're lying because I feel so shitty for no reason. Like, just woke up, just opened my eyes. And I'm like, okay, let me check your transit. And like, sure enough, boom, like you have a fake emotional wave from the transiting energy. Or he will experience a really big emotion. And then he'll tell me, like, I don't think human design is real. I'm experiencing this huge emotion. I'm in such a bad mood. And so this is my emotional wave. And then I'm like, okay, well, what's going on in your life? And then he tells me, oh, well, actually, I have this really big thing that's bothering me and it's really eating me up. That's happening in my business with my partner and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, so this is not an emotional wave. This is your emotional reaction to your life. Right. So both of those circumstances, he's a non emotional, and that's a lot going on there. So to get that awareness and really pinpoint, where is this coming from? And based on that, how do I process it? And what are the energetics that I need to bring to this to be able to let it go or resolve it or digest it, whatever the circumstance is?
Yeah. And I think that that's what's important, because you can hear this and be like, okay, so in essence, we're all the same. Like we're all having emotional waves. We're all having, there's a reason behind it, but we're all experiencing all the things all the time. And so like, why does it matter to have the differences or to know the differences? And the reason why it's important is because the differences tell you how to work with it, how to navigate it, to be able to come back to yourself with a capital S, like you as your own authority, not you as an amplified version of somebody else's authority, or you as, a echo chamber voice in the cosmic fucking echo chamber that all of the internet is. Like you as your own energy in your own internal world. Who are you? What supports you? How do you work with the energetics that are available to you? Because when we're talking about energy and through the lens of human design, it really is talking about your geometry, your mechanics that operate in a way that propel you towards your purpose, down your unique path. When you are in alignment, and alignment is literally your mechanics being aligned with how they're meant to operate. And the way that you operate that is with your unique authority, strategy, and authority. So it's very technical, And that helps the mind to get on board to then say like, oh, okay, this very complex and messy and uh, esoteric and mystical and non-containable, ever-changing emotional center that is just so freaking out there and everywhere. I can get on board because my mind logically understands that these are mechanics and that I'm here to attune to them for me as an individual. And that understands how my mechanics work. And then I can be messy within all of those things, because your emotional center is not meant to be boxed in, right, by your mind, like Dana was saying. But just understanding, like, this is why it's important to know, because just hearing this is like, okay, why do I even need to know this then? This is why. So I just wanted to highlight that. So then the next point on shit that no one tells you about undefined emotional centers is a relationship where two people are undefined. There can be a ping pong of emotions that happen. So for me and my husband, for example, we both are undefined emotionally, but we do create some emotional waves together. And I noticed that I have a hanging gate and he has the other hanging gate. So now we create this channel when we're in each other's energy and we can have this emotional wave that's happening. And it's still not consistent because when we're not around each other, we don't have this. But then when we are, we do. And also, even if we didn't create these emotional waves together, he can come home from work amplifying some emotions that he felt. And now I'm amplifying his amplified emotions. And he's passed that, he's passed it on. Like he's ping ponged it over to my side of the table and he feels good. He feels fine. And I feel overwhelmed or whatever the emotion is, the intense emotion. And then he then grasps it and I process it out. And now he's feeling that and I feel fine. And I noticed this, on the weekend, for example, we're literally throughout the day, it'll be like, I'm in the mood. Let's go, out to this restaurant. Let's go to downtown and walk around. And then it's like, I don't know if I'm in the mood to do that. It just sounds like a lot. Everything sounds like a lot. And then it swaps where then that other person who everything was a lot is like, okay, let's go. Are you ready to go? And then everything just sounds like too much. And so knowing that you can be two undefined emotional people, but ping pong your emotions back and forth. And the way that you set the ping pong down is literally go be by yourself for a moment, clear out those emotions, do what you need to do to let that go. There's so many different tools that we've talked about in the past, but that can be grounding, putting your feet in the earth, taking a shower, going for a walk by yourself, being creative on your own by yourself. There's so many different ways that you can process those emotions through your body, but then you come back to neutral, both of you, and then you can come be together and be neutral and it's fine. But also you can also just ping pong emotions. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just knowing that that's what you're doing. And it's not that there's something wrong or something externally that you need to now fix and address and change. It's really just an energetic dynamic that's happening. Okay. Yes. And then the next point, I'm just going to move through these other 2 points really quickly because I want to get into emotionally defined. Gosh, it's just so hard to say. So the last 2 points for the undefined emotional is how exhausting it can be to process emotions. And we kind of touched on this earlier, but it can be a lot to be feeling other people's emotions all the time. And you can feel like other people take up more space than you and you're always having to hold space for other people and be navigating what they're feeling. And they don't necessarily even realize that you're doing that because they're just in their own emotional experience as they're meant to be because they're the transmitter and you're the receiver. And it can feel like a tendency as an undefined emotional person to want to avoid emotions because it can feel exhausting to be feeling them all the time and to be processing them and letting them go, especially when you're in a state where your energy is needed on something else, like me being pregnant right now. It can just feel like too much to be around a lot of people or to be feeling emotions. So then you can go into this hyperdrive nervous system response where you don't want to feel emotions at all and you feel kind of numb to the world. And then it takes effort to just even feel emotions from that place. So if you are avoiding confrontation, if you are blaming other people for the things that you feel, it's so important to come back to, okay, what's my neutral? What's my sense of self? Like, go have that time alone to really empty out and connect with your own emotional being of, even if it's not charged, it still is this receptive center that is yours, that is sacred, that receives things in a sacred way that is you. And just connecting with that, giving gratitude to that, like being in relationship with that can just help you come back to your sense of self versus your not self of feeling like, gosh, holding space for other people is just so much work, or whatever your not self is telling you. So that's just a really good point to kind of lean into. And lastly, if you are non-emotional being, like I said, you're not meant to have consistent emotional drive for passion, romance, and desire. Doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your relationship or your life or you if you don't feel that all the time. And I notice this all the time where Dana has this energy, consistent energy to like go dance in the moonlight and put music on and move her body and like light candles and have this beautiful, magical, dreamy life. And like, honestly, so many times that is incredible. I fucking love it. And it's amazing. And I get to ride that with her, especially when we do retreats. It brings so much magic. And it's just so incredible to be around. And it brings this passion and magic is really the right word to my life. And I can see that and I can appreciate it and I can love it, but I am not here to be that. And to know that like, that's amazing for her. But for me, it's exhausting. Like I can be there and I can amplify it. And then I can seem like a magical, passionate, emotional person in that space too. But that is not consistent for me. So without that awareness, you can see how before human design or before understanding this, I had a lot of comparison and judgment in myself to say like, why am I not as driven in this space? Like, why am I not the person that is, guiding all of my friends and families to like go dance outside or to go have, dinner under the stars with my partner? Like, am I not committed to my relationship? Do I not care about other people's experiences in this space? Like, is Dana cooler than me or better than me or more deep than me? Like, there's can be all of this comparison that pops up when you don't understand that no, she literally has energy that is constantly driving that force in her life. And that's what she's meant to be transmitting. And I'm meant to receive it and amplify it at times, but then I'm meant to not even think about it or consider it at other times. Because if I try to force myself to do that, I will literally run myself into the ground with exhaustion. And sometimes she does that stuff and I'm like, okay, bye, go do that. Too exhausting. I don't even want to hear what you did. I don't want to know about your beach walk. I don't want to know about any of the things. Like, please go do that somewhere else because I'm exhausted. And even just knowing that you did that, it's just not the time for me. So it's just so funny. But yeah, so there's a time and a place and it's inconsistent as an undefined emotional being.
And honestly, it's hilarious hearing you say all of that. And on the other side of that, being Dana, being the defined emotional, I can say it truly is consistent for me. I truly do feel a constant desire or longing to make life this romantic, felt, deep experience. And, also my husband being non-emotional, being an undefined solar plexus, that's something that I have to be aware of. Oh, it's not always for him, that energy too. And that he also can feel exhausted by my constant need to like write poetry and like look at the stars. And so knowing that
write
about
a song in your bathtub and like be singing it with a candle on every single night of your life.
Yeah. So knowing that, I'm like, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with me. Sometimes he'll want to share that within me. And sometimes he'll even outdo me and amplify my energy but it's not like we don't have to be the same. And giving ourselves that permission in my relationship and knowing like, I'm going to go take my emotional fullness outside and be by myself a little bit. And that feels really empowering for both of us. It feels amazing for me because I'm not looking for someone else to match me or validate me. I get to experience my emotional wave on my own, in my own being, regardless of who I'm around and what happens, as it's meant to be. So you can see like it's empowering for both sides to just recognize, yes, we all feel emotions and they're constantly ever changing, and emotions are something that all humans have in common. But the way in which we experience them, the dynamics, the energetics is very different. So let's have awareness of that. Let's be okay with being different and also completely own and take responsibility for my side of it.
Yes, exactly. And I think that it's important to say that if you are emotionally defined, you are an energetic leader in that emotional center, meaning that your energetic energy there's so, without awareness, there's so much tendency to say to the masses or to, spiritual teachers teaching you, like, this is what you have to be in your relationship. This is how you have to be dedicated and driven and have this constantly there because this is what I feel. So then all of you should feel this. And this is once again your authority trying to be the authority over other people. But then knowing that, okay, I'm the transmitter, I'm the energetic leader. So if you are in relationship with somebody who is undefined there, to know that you being consistent and to say, like, I'm going to take my energetically consistent energy over here and do my own thing to give you space to feel your own energy. That's important because more often than not, the undefined emotional in this example would want to just keep holding that space and keep holding that space and like just let that person take the lead as they're kind of meant to. And if that leader never leads to then say, I'm going to go do my own thing and give you space, there can be this dynamic that happens where not self is created on both sides because one person is feeling emotionally overwhelmed and the other person is feeling frustrated that the other person isn't meeting them there. And there's this misunderstanding that can happen. So if you're an energetic leader, I just want to encourage you, be an energetic leader. Like, go and talk about your emotions, talk about your, share that you have an emotional wave for no reason, share that you're in a low for no reason or a high for no reason, share that you want to just go express this emotional energy. And if they're not in the space to want to do that with you, not forcing them to have to be on that road with you, but allowing yourself to have the confidence to just go express that by yourself and know that there's nothing wrong with the other person or wrong with you or your relationship and all those things. So be a leader. If you're a leader, be a leader. That's the message.
Yeah. So that kind of moves us into the shit that no one talks about being a defined emotional, the shit that no one talks about with having an emotional wave. So the big thing that I want to say is blame is such a big energy in the low frequency of not understanding your emotional wave or operating it with awareness, wanting to blame what we're feeling on external things. And, the whole thing about having an emotional wave is that it is random. And you also do have regular reactionary emotions. So that can be confusing, right? Something bad happens to you and you're sad. And so the next day, nothing bad happens to you, but you're sad because of your emotional wave. That can be confusing. And it puts us in this place where we're trying to label and reason our emotional wave when our emotional wave is random. It has no rhyme or reason, right? And so that lowest expression is wanting to blame an outside source for the low that we feel. And I've talked about this quite a lot, but in relationships, I feel like this shows up the most, just because this is the romance, passion, desire center of the body, that when we feel a low, we try to blame our partner for that thing, or we try to blame something that's happening. So being really aware of that and releasing blame, because at the end of the day, that is victimhood. That is a lack of empowerment. That is a lack of taking responsibility for your own wave. So that's a really big one to be aware of. And then on the high on our wave, that we're like chasing that high, it feels so good. Something that no one talks about is that the high feels so good, we don't really realize that it's a high. Sometimes we just think that's our normal baseline. And that is dangerous because we can make spontaneous, incorrect decisions from that high. That's a big one, right? If you have an emotional wave, it means you have an emotional authority. And it means that in order to make important life decisions, you need to wait out your wave, ride it out, give yourself time, make sure you're emotionally neutral so that you can access your clarity. So if you're in this high and it just feels good and you don't really realize it, you're like, I feel great today. Let's make some crazy life decisions. And then later on, you regret it because that was not something that was actually aligned with your truth. This is important to talk about because the highs are amazing on our emotional wave. We're here to enjoy them. We're here to celebrate them. We're here to feel them and to evolve from feeling those things. But we are not here to make spontaneous, baseless decisions from that place because we will create destruction and misalignment if we do that.
Yeah. And this is something that would just change the world if the collective knew this, if everyone knew this. I mean, a really good example, I see this all the time with Brian's work, is his boss for sure has an emotional wave. And everyone knows that without knowing that they know that, because a lot of times people will be like, just stay away from him. Like he's in a mood today. And they're undefined emotionally. Some of them are, right? And they're now wanting to avoid confrontation. And so they never bring up these topics that they need to address with him. And then later on, he's like, how come nobody told me this? Like, I had no idea that this was an issue within the business. Like, because they don't want to have that confrontation. They're afraid of his emotions because they are so inconsistent. And for him, he can literally I've seen this, my husband's worked there for over 10 years now. So I've seen this a lot where he can have a conversation like an employee review where he's in a high and he's like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, thanks for bringing up these points. Like, we need to do this, and agrees to all the things. And then he comes back to neutral and he's like, oh wait, no, well, this won't work and this won't work. And actually this isn't my truth. But then he'll be in a low when he goes to explain it to you. And it's like, no, everything, like, if you don't like it, too bad. Like, it's all too much. You're asking for too much. And it creates this sense within his team of like, of feeling valued on one hand, but then feeling like, well, there's just not clarity there. And so now what do we do? And then everybody's walking on eggshells because they don't know what's going to happen. And then they're in their not self of not wanting to have confrontation. And it's just creating all of these dynamics. So this example, right? This is one example of how this energetic leader being defined emotionally has no awareness of their energy and now is creating all of these issues externally because they're making decisions when they're in a high and they're making decisions when they're in a low and when they're neutral, but it's just so inconsistent. And if you are literally an authority over other people, like somebody's boss or somebody's president, then you create all of this emotional strife within the world and even like logical decision-making strife and destruction in the world because you don't have awareness over the fact that what you're feeling right now isn't necessarily your truth. And it's not what you're going to be feeling maybe tomorrow or the next day. And now this attribute collectively and more commonly and patriarchally has been attributed to women, right? That women can't be leaders or can't be authoritative figures or can't be presidents, for example, because they might hit the nuke codes when they're emotionally in a crash, but it's not actually their truth and they can't see the truth from their emotions, right? There's this whole story that has been projected from the leaders that are mostly men in our history onto society to then put it onto someone who's weaker because they're now seeing, oh, this is weak and this must be from them and blah, blah, blah. There's all these stories that are woven into this. But I just want to say that if our leaders in the world could have understanding over whether they have an emotionally defined center or not, and what that really means, there would be so much more acceptance. There would be less wars and conflict. There would be less fighting and strife and heartbreak and taking advantage of and abusing and putting someone under your foot, being less than or more than. There'd be so much more acceptance in the world because you have acceptance of yourself and you know how to navigate as yourself. So this is a whole other topic that there's so many fucking dynamics I could get into and rant about for a long time. And maybe we need to have an episode about all that. But just seeing, okay, so no, I don't need to go talk to Brian's boss and tell him about his emotional wave because, first of all, I'm a projector and that would be so repelling that I would probably need to kill myself after. But just me understanding, oh, he has an emotional wave. Just Brian understanding, oh, he has an emotional wave and I don't. And that's why I'm feeling the ways that I'm feeling and I'm not wanting to confront him. And that's actually on me. That's my not self of my undefined emotional center. Brian's already 10 times more empowered in his workplace, even with his boss not understanding or doing anything different. So there's always an opportunity for you, your own awareness to empower you to be more in tune with and aligned in your life, even if the people around you aren't aligned in their life.
Yeah.
Now, you doing that might lead to them discovering and learning about that. But really, that's none of your business. Your business is you and your shit.
Yeah, because I've definitely experienced that not self kind of in someone else can really trigger the not self in you. Like their being in their not self is triggering, and then you want to go into yours, and you have to take the high road to break that vicious downward spiral. So even if you're, someone close in your life, like a boss or a partner or someone like that, is not open to human design, they don't have this awareness and they're not interested in learning it, even if that's the case, you can still break the cycle of not self reactivity by you having awareness. And that's your empowerment. That's your choice. So I love that. And the next thing that nobody freaking talks about with having a defined emotional center and an emotional wave is that there is a difference between being on a low on your emotional wave and being in a crash on your emotional wave. Those are two different things. So there are different emotional waves, and depending on the channel that you have, it's going to tell you which emotional wave you have. And those different types of emotional wave will have a different trigger that can create a crash. And so for me, for example, my wave is all about expectations. And when I have an expectation that is not met, I can crash on my wave. And that crash is a completely disproportionate reaction to the thing, but it is deep and painful, emotionally painful and low. And it can take me sometimes days or even a week to actually move out from the depths of that crash. So the crashes on our emotional wave, each wave has a different trigger that creates that crash. You can learn what that trigger is. A great resource for that is our book, Your Human Design. We go through all of the different things there, but you can learn to kind of manage that trigger so that you can avoid it and you can avoid those really deep, low, challenging crashes. However, even if you're navigating with the highest awareness and you're doing all of the energetic hygiene, you are never going to get rid of your emotional lows because lows are normal. Your wave has highs, it has neutrals, and it has lows. That is normal. And when you are in your highest expression, you will still have lows. You're meant to. You always will. So there's no way to avoid lows, but there is a way to avoid crashes. Now, even when you're practicing avoiding crashes, as I have been since the beginning of my human design journey, I'm still not perfect. I'm still learning. I've definitely gotten a lot better, but it still happens every once in a while where I crash on my wave because I have had an expectation that gets totally broken and I have to go through that crash. And in that moment, it's really important to have compassion for yourself, to know what's happening. My husband can tell when I've crashed on my wave and he reminds me. So it's like there's definitely a level of self-compassion there. But the main message I wanted to share is that there's a difference between your low and your crash, and to just know what's the one that I'm trying to avoid and what's the low that I'm not trying to avoid, I'm trying to embrace with open arms and allow myself to feel, because that part of your wave, the low part of your wave, is 100% meant for you in its highest expression, even though it's a lower emotion on that spectrum. Okay, the next thing that no one freaking talks about with having an emotional wave is that your emotional wave could be unconscious in your chart. right? So you're looking at the channel that makes your emotional wave. If that channel is black and it's on your personality side, then you're going to be more conscious, mentally aware of your emotional wave. If that channel is red or even half red, then your wave can be unconscious on your design side. And it might take more effort or intention to actually feel your wave. So we meet people sometimes that have an emotional wave and they're like, I don't resonate with that. I don't think I have a wave. And we look at their chart, your wave is completely unconscious. So it's important to know that if you have an unconscious wave, you still have a wave, you still have emotional authority. And it's really important to create an awareness of your wave, even though it might take more intention. Now, you could also have more than one emotional wave. You could have 2 different kinds of waves, or even 3 different kinds of waves. Technically, you could have all of them. And with that, it's really important to know that yes, you have these different waves happening at once. That can be kind of a mental head trip. It's like, how do I know if I'm a high or a low? We still recommend feeling for yourself. Do I feel like I'm on a high or a low? That's more important than being constantly aware of the 2 different waves and the different dynamics. But that is something to keep in mind that nobody really talks about. And the more waves you have in general, it's just going to tell you that you got more going on with the highs and lows. And you'll need to be even more fine tuned about feeling when you are actually neutral. And then the last thing I wanted to say is people don't talk about why, if you're defined emotional, that you're still sensitive to emotions. We have this, like when we first hear about human design, you hear that you're a defined emotional and that you are a transmitter and that you're not empathetic. People say, like, wait, I am very emotionally attuned to other people and I feel things very deeply too. And I cry when I watch movies, even though I have this defined emotional center. So here's what I wanted to say about this. You having a defined emotional center means that you are very sensitive to the world of emotions. It means that you are a very emotional person and that when you tap into your wave, you are easily able to tap into emotions and to feel emotions and to cry. And you can create a lot of emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, and emotional awareness. And you can easily see in other people and understand emotions, but it's more of a sympathetic understanding instead of taking in that energy and experiencing it in your body. Right. So there's a difference there. It's not that you're completely tuned out to other people's emotions at all. It's just that you're not taking in the energetics of their emotions and experiencing it in your own body. So that's the subtle difference there. When I watch movies, I cry when I watch a movie too, because when I'm watching it, I have so much depth around emotions in my own life. It's just easily there, ready to spark my own emotional energy, but it's not taking in the frequency of that external thing and holding it in my body. So that's a big thing that we wanted to say because we posted an Instagram post recently of like non-emotionals watching movies and crying. And a lot of people were like, I'm confused about that because as an emotional being with an emotional wave, I feel very emotional too. And it's like, yeah, of course. And when you watch that movie, like for me, a lot of times when I watch a movie where something sad is happening, I instantly can go to the place in my own life where I've felt that, whether it was based on my own experience or just a feeling that I felt on my wave. But it is then kind of triggering my own inquiry into my own emotions, not actually taking in the energetics from that thing into my physical body.
Yeah. Whereas when I watch a movie, I literally can feel like my best friend's child died and in a horrible car crash and what that really feels like. And, whatever the scenario is that's happening in the show or the movie, I feel as if that happened in my life. And a great example of this before I knew anything about human design was in college. I binged watched all the Grey's Anatomies that were out at that point. There's so many more now. And in one of the seasons, one of the main characters' husbands dies, and it's so heartbreaking that I literally couldn't get out of bed for like 3 days in my dorm room. I literally felt like, and here I am, I barely dated. Like I was so Christian. Like I think I'd only had sex like maybe twice. And I felt as if my husband, my terminally ill husband, had died. And there was no way I could even go to class because it was as if it happened to me. And so that's the difference, right? I didn't know I was amplifying that emotion and then holding on to it because it felt good to feel that amount of heartbreak. And I've never felt anything like that in my life. But then it really, I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, what is actually wrong with me? Like, do I have mental health issues? Like, am I okay? Because I had never seen anybody else go to that depth. And I really let myself amplify the shit out of that thing to where even just thinking back on that, I'm like, oh my God, I was not okay. Like, I was unable to eat. So it was really intense for me. But that's the capacity that we have to be able to do that. Now, I can notice when I'm around, all of my closest friends have a defined emotional center. Dana, our friend Emma, and Steffi, when we are all together, I'm around 3 people with emotional waves. And I'm the only person who is sensing, oh, this is what this person's feeling, this is what that person's feeling, this is what this person's feeling. And I'm feeling all of it. And they can be crying several times throughout the day at different times. Like, there's always tears that's somewhere happening in my emotional container.
So
And
true.
and for them, it's just so natural and normal and beautiful. And it really shows me what it looks like to just be like right there where the sink is like almost on, and it just takes a little tiny tap and then boop, the faucet's on. Whereas for me, in my normal daily life, I have to like, okay, we're going to turn the faucet on today. Like, okay, that's what we're going to do. And I need to get like a wrench out to crank that thing open and take some energy. Right. But because I can amplify their emotions, it can feel like when I'm around them, like I get to now choose, because I have this awareness, I get to choose like, okay, I'm going to amplify this. I'm going to go there. I'm going to just really be the most excited and hyper in the room because I'm amplifying everybody's high, or I'm going to be really amplifying those lows and really like sobbing or whatever the thing is. Or I can choose to just like, oh, I'm feeling this, and I'm just going to let that pass through because it's going to take a lot of work for me to feel this. So your awareness empowers you to then work with those emotions and not be so like overrun by the emotional world around you, because obviously you're not going to know necessarily every single person's design in your life. Like I kind of do because of my profession, but just having awareness of your own, that's really the key.
Yes, I love it so much. And so, if you have gotten to the end of this episode, we want to really thank you because we just believe so wholeheartedly that this work of the emotional center is very, very, very important. And if you're doing it and you're wanting to show up in this way and take responsibility for your emotional center, we applaud you, we bow to you, we thank you because you are someone who's truly changing the world and doing that. If you're the only person at your work that has an awareness of your emotional center, that's enough for you to help change all of those people. If you're the only person in your family who has awareness about your emotional center, that is still enough to help shift the energetics of all of those people, because you have the awareness that empowers you to stop getting overrun or overwhelmed or creating vicious cycles of not self. Like you're the one who is able to break the cycle because you have this awareness, because you're doing this work. So we are really, really grateful for everyone who cares about this in the way that we do. We see all the time in the people in our lives who take responsibility for their emotional center and understand the dynamics. We see them become a pillar of someone who is mature, who is reliable, reliable meaning like emotionally safe around other people, and that anything can happen, anything can come, and they feel like a safe person to be around. That doesn't mean that they avoid feeling their emotions or that they, try to seem linear and not messy or not changing. It means that they allow all of those things to flow through them, right? And that is an emotionally safe person. And it's such an undeniable feeling when you're around someone that you really feel emotionally safe around. It is so beautiful. You feel like you can just bloom, like you can just be who you are because you trust them. There's a level of trust in that person. No matter what happens, I know that we'll be able to navigate it and I'll feel emotionally safe. So that's a really beautiful thing to be and to strive to be in the world. And if you are wanting to go deeper, like, okay, what is my daily energetic hygiene for my emotional center exactly? How do I practice these things? How do I work on these things? We do recommend that mini course that we just released in our Besties membership. We really dive into that in a very simplified way. Whereas this conversation, we were trying to more share the meaning, like how it impacts our lives and the different angles and complexities. Because when we read about this stuff online, it's the very surface level, but there's all of this shit that no one told you about it. So we had to come on and share it with you. We'd love to hear how this episode landed for you. We'd love to hear if you have a defined emotional center, or if you have it undefined, and if you knew these things that we talked about, or if these were all new concepts to you.
Yeah, let us know and reach out to us anytime on our website, daylunalife.com. That's where you can find all of our different offerings and keep exploring your human design journey in a variety of different ways. It's where you can find your human design besties, as well as our human design reader training and our book, Your Human Design. There's just so many things that we can't help but create because there's so much to talk about and know and understand. And it literally is life changing. It applies to every single facet of our lives. So all of that and more is on daylunalife.com. And then you can connect with us on Instagram at dayluna. And that's it. We love you. We hope that you can move through your day and your week today with that emotional understanding, awareness, safety, groundedness that you are and that you deserve and that you have access to at any point in any moment in your life, and that it creates more freedom and more understanding in your day and in your life this week. So enjoy it, ride it out, surf the wave, move through it, and we're sending you so much love. Thank you for tuning in with us today. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to follow along and learn more about human design.